He sat stiffly in the flickering green light of the grand hall, feeling its surreal architecture swallow him in swirling patterns and alien glyphs. Every breath tasted metallic, as though the air itself had rusted around him. The smell of unknown spices and heated crystal lingered on the back of his tongue. Jonas Teller was trying his best to look composed, or at least, to look as if he belonged here. The towering columns that loomed to his left seemed almost grown from living rock, their surfaces carved with luminescent filaments that pulsed in a slow, thrumming heartbeat of blue. He wondered if the entire palace breathed, too. Royal guards in shimmering obsidian armor flanked the edges of the hall, their curved spears making faint humming noises as if alive with energy. They watched him through visor slits without a shred of warmth. Perhaps he should not have snuck in with the human diplomatic envoy. But if he hadn't, how else was he supposed to salvage the fragile job that had brought him to this star system in the first place? Jonas had once been a mid-level engineer on a drifting salvage vessel. He had known the stench of hydroponic failures, the buzz of failing hull plating, and the slow gnaw of hopelessness. Then everything fell apart a year ago when an anti-piracy squad boarded his ship, accusing his captain of trafficking contraband. Jonas had been cut loose. No conviction stuck to him personally, but the brand of guilt by association lingered. Doors shut wherever he went. He found himself drifting further and further from the centers of human commerce, signing on for shady gigs in frontier systems that promised to pay well and overlook the smudge on his record. He was resourceful, sarcastic, and carried a bitterness in his heart that he tried to hide behind a confident smirk. Staring around at the alien court's grandeur, Jonas was overwhelmed by the sensory details of a culture he barely understood. He was part of a small group that had been allowed to enter with a special permit. The older diplomat leading them, a woman named Rena, had explained that they were here to finalize a crucial trade route that would link human outposts to the realm of the noble Galar species. But that was about all Jonas knew. He suspected these aliens were more advanced. Anyone with a palace so mesmerizing had to be. He gripped his small hollow tablet close to his side, trying not to shift nervously. The court music began, a haunting, polyphonic arrangement that reverberated across the walls, making him feel as though invisible hands were passing through his chest. It was a strange, enchanting sound, punctuated by chimes that reminded him of dripping water. Then she entered. He did not know who she was at first, only that the hush that fell upon the entire hall must have meant she was someone important. The princess, as it turned out. Her form was half hidden by a swirling gown of luminescent fabric. A subtle coruscation of colors rolled down her slender frame. Jonas realized with a quiet jolt that the shift in color wasn't just the fabric. It was also something in her skin, which had an otherworldly pearlescent sheen. Her hair, a deep cascade of iridescent filaments, was bound with a single crest-like headpiece that framed her regal face. Two small ridges traced across her cheekbones, symmetrical and faintly glowing. Her eyes were large and deep, irises of hammered gold that pinned him where he stood. He couldn't tear his gaze away. He'd read somewhere that the Galar were known for their empathic abilities, or perhaps it was a rumor. But as she swept toward the dais in front of them, Jonas felt a trickle of something like static across his scalp. His heart hammered. For reasons he couldn't articulate, he fought the urge to hold his breath. And then, as the hush stretched, a tiny itch tickled the inside of his nose. He tried to fight it. He really did. He pinched his nostrils shut, swallowed, tried to discreetly breathe through his mouth. But the swirling incense in the air was relentless. The spicy, sweet tang of unknown chemicals seemed to gather in the back of his sinuses like a wave cresting for a crash. He scrambled for a handkerchief. He only found an empty pocket. And the moment overcame him. Jonas sneezed, startlingly loud, the kind of sneeze that echoes in vast, silent halls. If time could have slowed, it would have done so then. The sound felt like a thunderclap ricocheting off the ancient pillars. His entire body lurched forward, and in that unfortunate instant, a bright fleck of spittle, a microscopic sphere of fluid perhaps, flew in a swift arc and grazed the hem of the princess's shimmering gown. Jonas froze. The Galar guards stood straighter, their spears humming. The entire diplomatic party shifted in horror. The princess herself turned slowly. Her golden eyes widened for half a second. Or maybe that was just Jonas projecting. At first, no one spoke. Jonas felt as though he'd just broken some sacred taboo. Then the hush cracked. In hurried, near-hysterical tones, Rena apologized, stepping forward and trying to placate the court with flurries of diplomatic phrases. Jonas had no idea what she was saying. He was stuck, mortified, caught in this moment. He tried to stammer an apology in the Gaelic tongue. He'd learned a phrase or two on the flight over. "I beg forgiveness," he said in halting syllables. Then the princess waved her slender hand, a gesture that cut through the tension. The guards relaxed, but only slightly. She approached him. Up close, Jonas saw her features with greater clarity. She was heartbreakingly alien, a presence that made the fine hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. She had an otherworldly beauty, and there was something vaguely intimidating in the way her pupils slid vertically when the light shifted. She spoke in a low, measured voice, each syllable resonant with subtle notes that Jonas couldn't quite decipher. A translator in Rena's ear whispered. She asks if the sneeze was an act of aggression or an involuntary reflex. A strangled laugh nearly burst out of Jonas. It was involuntary. Reflex. He bowed, hoping that was the correct gesture. I sincerely apologize. The princess's expression was unreadable. She parted her lips as though tasting the air around him. Her luminous ridges flickered, as if capturing faint data from his presence. She turned to address the hall. Her voice was steady but resonant with what might have been surprise. Jonas felt the hum of it in the air, touching something in him that made his heart pound. The translator hurried to keep up. Rena's frantic face suggested this was all going terribly wrong. But then, the diplomat's expression turned ashen. Well? Jonas dared to whisper. What's she saying? Rena muttered. She's declaring that, oh, this is so bizarre, your bodily fluids have touched a member of the royal lineage in a manner that constitutes a bonding instigation. She swallowed. By their ancient laws, you have triggered a courtship or mating rite. Jonas almost choked on the swirling incense. A what? He watched as the princess's eyes flickered with what might have been curiosity or alarm. She studied him like a puzzle. The hush in the hall was electric. Her people exchanged murmurs in their melodic tongue, and Jonas felt an avalanche of tension gather around him. He tried to push a laugh, to disclaim all of this as a misunderstanding, but no sound emerged from his throat. By the end of that chaotic day, Jonas found himself whisked from the grand hall and deposited in a private wing of the palace. The large, vaulted corridor outside his door was guarded by 4 imposing Galar warriors. Rena's frantic explanations and negotiations had revealed that, according to the most arcane of Galar customs, a non-consensual deposit of bodily fluid upon a royal was interpreted as a preludial claim. The princess had the right to reject the claim if she wished. But apparently, that would provoke a dangerous dishonor. The solution, under tradition, was that they must be temporarily betrothed until a formal hearing could be arranged. Sitting alone in his luxurious but nerve-wracking suite, Jonas tried to wrap his mind around how a single sneeze had catapulted him into this predicament. He buried his face in his hands. What the hell did I do to deserve this? The bitterness, the sarcasm, the old wounds, he felt them swirling inside him, spurred by the absurd turn his life had taken. In the reflection of the polished onyx wall, he caught sight of his own drawn features. Lines of worry pressed into the corners of his eyes. Hours later, the door slid open with a melodic chime. Jonas stood to face whoever entered. To his alarm, it was the princess herself. She had changed into a simpler outfit, a fitted wrap that highlighted her tall, lithe form. Her hair's luminescent filaments were partially braided. And though her expression remained difficult for him to read, there was a certain softness in her posture. She murmured a phrase in her language, and an automated translator pinned to Jonas's collar emitted a robotic version in English. I come to speak with you privately. He felt a jolt. She had to be the bravest or the most determined person in this entire fortress to visit him alone. He tried to speak carefully. I apologize for what happened earlier. Her golden irises studied him, pupil slits narrowing. Your apology is noted, the translator droned. My name is Princess Vyren Sarel. I understand your bodily discharge was unintentional. Jonas stifled a cringe at the phrase. Bodily discharge. Yes, absolutely. I would never intentionally, spit on you, or anything like that. He paused, unsure. I'm Jonas Teller. She stepped closer, an otherworldly grace in her movement. Jonas Teller, she repeated slowly. We have many intricate customs, and your sneeze has triggered an old rite that most of my people do not even remember. This situation is unusual. Her voice carried undertones that did not translate well, but Jonas sensed a swirl of confusion, caution, and faint amusement. He said quietly, I don't want to cause you trouble. If there's a way to fix this without offending anyone, I'm eager to do it. I'm just a nobody, honestly. You're royalty. This must be humiliating for you. Her expression flickered. I'm not as fragile as you might believe. And your status does not concern me. But the old law is quite rigid. It demands we enter a formal Vishala binding so the court may examine our compatibility. She gave a slight tilt of her head. And if we are not deemed compatible, the betrothal is null. But the process to test that compatibility is personal. Jonas felt a wave of heat bloom in his chest, a mix of dread and surreal fascination. Personal? He managed, voice tight. The translator hummed. It requires closeness. Rituals that measure emotional resonance, mental synergy, and physical adaptation. He stared, unsure if he'd heard correctly. You're saying we basically have to prove we'd make a good couple? She hesitated, then nodded. In a manner of speaking. He swallowed, mind reeling. Part of him still clung to the comedic absurdity of the situation, that a single sneeze could lead to this. But another part, deeper, recognized the seriousness behind her eyes. She was a dominant, confident figure. He could see it in the way she held herself. Yet there was something else too, a vulnerability. Perhaps even fear. If she was forced by tradition, was any of this truly voluntary? He stepped forward, noticing how the shimmering light in the room accentuated the pearlescent hue of her skin. His heart pounded. Look, I'm all for clearing this up. But I don't want it to be forced on you. I'm a stranger. She breathed slowly, and the lines across her cheeks shifted colors in a subtle ripple. I thank you for your concern. But if I reject it outright, there are political repercussions that may endanger both our peoples. My father, the king, is not as flexible. And my mother passed before I could glean her wisdom. I have no choice but to see this through. Something in her voice caught Jonas's attention. A hidden sadness. He wanted to ask more about her mother but held his tongue. So, what happens next? Vyren's lips parted just enough to reveal a faint glint of pointed teeth. The translator repeated her words in a bland monotone. We proceed under watchful eyes. We will be tested. We must remain in close quarters. We must share certain Galar bonding rituals to see if we can align. She paused, her ridges fluttering. I do not know if you will survive. He felt his heart skip a beat. Survive? She gave a small, sorrowful shrug. The laws are old, the rituals older. We rarely evoke them. There are energies within us that might prove overwhelming for a human physiology. But the alternative is unthinkable. Jonas exhaled shakily. The entire palace, with its living architecture, its luminous corridors, suddenly felt like a labyrinth that might swallow him. He thought about his old scars, the ways he'd been betrayed, and how he'd built walls around himself. Now he faced a crisis that was bigger than anything he'd imagined. To walk away was to risk war or some kind of cosmic taboo. To stay was to enter an alien tradition he didn't fully understand, with a princess who looked at him through molten gold eyes, as if she were equally uncertain. Yet, beneath that swirl of fear, he felt an odd flicker of curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, this was a path that would force him to break the shell around his heart. He gave a nervous laugh. Well, I guess we'd better figure this out. Princess Vyren stepped closer. Her delicate, scaled fingertips brushed his temple, sending a tiny electric shock of warmth through him. He froze, gazing into her eyes, and she held his stare, unwavering. The translator did not speak for a moment. When it did, her voice sounded almost reverent. "We shall attempt to see if there is resonance." The swirl of golden in her irises seemed to intensify. Jonas felt dizzy, as if an invisible tide had suddenly taken hold of the air around them. For a second, it seemed as though the floor rippled, and the walls inhaled. Then her touch withdrew, and the sensation vanished, leaving him breathless. She offered a slow nod. "You are not frightened?" He swallowed. "I'm terrified," he admitted, voice raw. "But let's do it anyway." She inclined her head, a faint ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. Then she turned, gliding from the room. Jonas remained behind, heart pounding, wondering if he had just signed up for something that would transform his entire life. Or end it. The next day began with a cold, pre-dawn hush across the palace. Jonas awoke from restless sleep to the sound of distant chimes echoing through the corridors. He sat up, feeling the plush alien bed conform to his body. For a few seconds he stared at the swirling pattern across the ceiling, a mosaic of living mineral, letting reality settle in. He was betrothed to a princess, an alien princess, because of a sneeze. He almost laughed out loud, but the heaviness in his chest strangled the sound. A moment later, a soft knock drew his attention. He invited whoever it was to enter, and a small, slender Galar attendant, with darker ridges lining their cheeks, stepped in. They spoke in hushed tones, but Jonas's translator picked up the words. "You are to meet the princess in the rites of Accord Chamber. Please follow me." In the corridor, guarded by towering sentries, Jonas was escorted through labyrinthine passages. Great arches framed vistas of alien gardens. He saw shimmering plants that seemed to whisper and fold under the faint pink light of the planet's sun. He tried to keep track of the route, but the corridors twisted unpredictably, and the patterns on the walls were mesmerizing. The air smelled faintly of sweet pollen. Occasional bursts of steam drifted up from hidden vents along the floor, giving the palace an almost organic atmosphere. Finally, they arrived at a set of ornate double doors that merged into the walls, so seamless Jonas thought it was just an alcove. When they slid open, they revealed a large circular chamber lit by an ambient glow from the high domed ceiling. At the center of this space lay a gently rippling pool of luminescent water, set into the floor. The princess stood on the far side, her gaze locked on Jonas as he entered. Flanking her was an older Galar man in elaborate robes, likely a priest or officiant of some kind. Vyrn's attire was simpler than before, a soft, flowing wrap dyed in deep shades of dusk, with filaments of her hair draping around her shoulders. She inclined her head. Jonas nodded back. The officiant spoke with a melodic rhythm that the translator relayed. "These are the preliminary rites. You shall speak your truths, guided by the waters, and attempt to form a fragile resonance that either shall bloom or wither. Fear not, but know the waters see beneath your facades." Jonas felt the tension in the pit of his stomach. He tried to keep his face neutral. "What do we do?" Vyrn motioned with her hand toward the pool. "We must each submerge to our waists. The waters sense our hearts, or so legend says. Then we recite a vow to open ourselves to possibility." Her eyes flicked over his form, as though assessing his readiness. "It won't hurt." He stepped forward, removed his boots, and gingerly tested the water with a toe. It was warm and produced tiny sparks of bioluminescent light that rippled at his touch. Cautiously he waded in, feeling the water glide around him like living silk. The bottom was smooth, with no abrupt drop-off. Across from him, Vyrn entered as well, and her expression was calm, almost regal, though Jonas sensed a flicker of nerves behind her composure. Their eyes met over the shimmering surface. The officiant lifted their arms. "Speak now, child of Earth, child of Galar. Offer your words of acceptance or refusal." Jonas swallowed. He had no formal script, so he simply cleared his throat. "I, Jonas Teller, stand here because of a cosmic coincidence. I have no intention to dishonor your customs. I will do my best to respect your traditions and to open myself to the possibility of a bond. His voice felt small, echoing in the chamber. Vyren, in turn, bowed her head slightly. I, Princess Vyren Serral of Galar, accept the steps of this rite. I do not do so lightly. I vow to see this through with sincerity. At once, the water flared with a spectral glow, swirling around them. Jonas felt a strange warmth seep up his legs and settle in his core. A hush fell, broken only by the watery lap against the edge. He wondered if something was scanning him. Then the officiant intoned, "Your vow is sealed for the moment. Come forth." Jonas and Vyren emerged from the pool, droplets casting tiny glowing motes across the smooth floor. The sense of something intangible lingered, as though a subtle consciousness had brushed against Jonas's mind. He looked at Vyren, unsure if she felt it, too. The officiant nodded solemnly. "The first step is complete. You shall spend time together this day, learning one another's presence, letting your hearts find an intersection if it is there to be found. And at dusk you shall enter the second step." Without another word, the priest left, robes trailing behind. Jonas stood awkwardly, clothes clinging to his lower body. Vyren's wrap was similarly soaked, revealing the silhouette of her alien form in tantalizing outlines that made him blush, though her composure did not waver. With a tilt of her head, she gestured for him to follow. He did, feeling an odd mixture of trepidation and curiosity. She led him into an adjoining corridor that curved gently, the walls shifting colors in response to their movement. Windows opened onto a courtyard filled with strange, twisting trees whose trunks glistened as though coated in glass. They walked side by side in silence for a moment, water dripping from their clothes. Jonas could feel his heart thudding in his chest. Eventually he spoke softly. "That water, it felt almost alive." She glanced at him. "It is said the waters are linked to an ancient creature that once dwelled within the planet's crust. The Galar see them as conduits for emotional truth. Whether that is literal or symbolic, I cannot say." He nodded. He watched her carefully, noticing how she wrung a bit of water from the edge of her garment. Even royalty had small, humanizing gestures. "I'm sorry if this is invasive, but do you want this to work out?" he asked, voice hushed. "I mean, do you actually want me?" She halted. Her luminous eyes flickered in the soft light. "Want is a complicated word. I do not know you. My people believe a bond cannot be forced, it must unfold. Yet we are compelled to attempt it, for the sake of the law. And, to be honest, I have felt very alone in recent years. Ever since my mother died, I have had no one to confide in. So perhaps a part of me welcomes the chance for something different." Her ridges glimmered with subtle pulses. "But it scares me, too." Something in her candid tone tugged at Jonas's guarded heart. He saw a reflection of his own loneliness in her, the bitterness he carried from past betrayals. The tension in his chest softened a little. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But maybe that's okay. Let's just see how it goes." She gave the smallest smile. "Yes. Let us see." They spent hours walking the palace grounds, accompanied by a discreet retinue of guards who kept their distance. Vyren guided him through gardens where shimmering vines grew upside down, capturing motes of sunlight that made them glow like tiny stars. She showed him a corridor of historical murals that depicted the Galar's legendary ancestors descending from the sky in living ships. Jonas noticed how each image reverberated with a sense of reverence, and, in some, an undercurrent of sorrow. He asked questions, half joking, half curious, and she answered with a mix of royal poise and moments of genuine animation, especially when he teased her about their odd predicament. Sometimes she would respond with a wry retort in her language, and the translator, though monotone, conveyed her subtle humor. He found himself enjoying her company more than he expected. Midday came, and they ended up in a quieter wing, Vyren's personal study. A circular window revealed a breathtaking view of the alien city outside. Towers shaped like gently curving horns rose against a violet sky. Clouds swirled as if drawn by invisible tides. Jonas watched them for a moment, then turned to see Vyren pouring them each a pale, shimmering beverage from a decanter. A mild infusion, she explained. It helps calm the mind. Will you try it? Jonas accepted the delicate cup. Its contents tasted like spiced honeysuckle with a faint tang. Warmth spread through his chest, soothing the knot of anxiety that had tightened there. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, gazing through the window as the city pulsed with life. The soft hush of the study, the intangible connection that came from shared solitude, lulled him into a calm he hadn't felt in ages. He remembered how not so long ago, he'd drifted job to job, scraping by, carrying the guilt and shame of his past associations. He'd expected his life to remain lonely. People were always suspicious of him. He was the resourceful but tarnished engineer, the wounded man with a brittle sense of humor. And now, here he was, sipping an alien infusion with a princess who was equally haunted, in her own way. Eventually she spoke. Jonas, I sense you carry something heavy. May I ask what weighs on you? He ran a hand over his stubble, exhaling. My old ship got into trouble. My captain was smuggling contraband. I didn't know it at the time, but that doesn't matter to the authorities. The crew scattered, and I was blacklisted. I haven't felt safe or welcome anywhere since. He stared at the swirling beverage. And there's also the fact that I used to care for someone, romantically. She turned out to be, well, she sold me out to the authorities to save her own skin. That was the final nail in the coffin for my trust. Viwaran studied him, her gaze gentle. I am sorry. Betrayal is a wound that festers, especially when the betrayer is one you loved. It can close your heart. Jonas nodded, emotion tight in his throat. It did. And I guess that's why I can't decide if this forced betrothal is a cosmic joke or a second chance. The princess lowered her gaze, the filaments of her hair sliding over her shoulders like liquid light. I understand the burden of a closed heart. Sometimes I fear I am more statue than flesh, that my duty has stripped me of the ability to trust or to let myself be vulnerable. Her eyes flicked up to his. Yet here we stand. Silence hummed between them. Outside the window, a gust of wind sent swirling shapes across the skyline, and the violet hues of the sky darkened slightly. The day was waning. Jonas realized that soon, dusk would settle, and with it would come the second step of the ritual. A coil of nervousness twisted in his stomach, but there was also an unexpected glimmer of anticipation. He found himself brushing his fingertips across the table until they lightly touched hers. It was a small, delicate gesture, but her eyes widened as though he just performed a bold act. Her ridges flickered faintly, and he felt a tingle pass through him, reminiscent of that moment she touched his temple. The translator was silent, no words needed. For a long breath, they remained that way, hand to hand, hearts pounding. Finally, she broke the contact. Standing, she walked to the window, her posture tense. In our second step, she said softly, we must share the same living space tonight. There is a deep telepathic exchange that the Galar perform in the dark hours, a merging of consciousness that is both dreamlike and real. If we achieve it, we proceed to the final phases of the binding rite. If we fail, or if your human mind cannot withstand it, the betrothal ends, and the monarchy will have justification to move on. She paused. The question is, do we want it to continue, or do we want it to fail? Jonas's pulse throbbed in his veins. I want to see if there's something here, he whispered, surprising even himself with the sincerity in his tone. Despite how crazy all this is, I'm not ready to walk away. She turned her head just enough for him to catch her profile, illuminated by the lavender glow of the waning sun. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling with suppressed emotion. Then let us not fail. They prepared a chamber for the ritual. It was a spherical room in a secluded tower of the palace. The walls were smooth, embedded with faint lines of what Jonas guessed were living circuits. A faint hum pervaded the air. A large circular bed, layered in plush, shimmering blankets, sat at the center. It looked simultaneously inviting and deeply intimidating. Viwaran stood to one side, instructing a trio of attendants on final arrangements. Jonas stood to the other, rubbing sweaty palms on his thighs. When the attendants left, the doors sealed with a soft hiss. VYRN exhaled slowly, turning to face Jonas with a mixture of composure and obvious nerves. The telepathic exchange is facilitated by an empathic bond known as the Arif flow. You and I will lie together, and I'll guide you through the connection. I'll attempt to show you portions of my memories, my emotions. In turn, you'll have to be open to sharing yours. If you resist, the bond fails. If I push too hard, it could overwhelm your mind. She swallowed, her ridges pulsing with color. Jonas took a shaky breath. What happens if we succeed? She hesitated. We form a partial mental bond. We'll know each other more intimately than typical companions, or even typical lovers among your species. It's not permanent yet, but it's a foundation that can deepen into a true union. Her gaze flickered away. It's also very personal. More intimate than physical touch. He felt the weight of her words. This was not just about desire or tradition. It was about exposing the deepest, rawest parts of themselves. Jonas had spent years constructing walls. The thought of letting someone in like that both thrilled and terrified him. I'll try, he said, voice low. I just don't know if I'm strong enough. VYRN's gaze softened. We will find out. Come. She walked to the bed, gesturing for him to lie beside her. Jonas removed his jacket, his boots, leaving just a loose undershirt and pants. She slipped off the outer layer of her wrap, leaving an elegantly draped shift of luminescent fabric that clung to her form. Her alien physiology was both seductive and mesmerizing, slender limbs, subtle scaling along her neck and collarbone, the faint glow of her ridges. She settled down onto the bed's cushions, moving with quiet grace. Jonas joined her, his heart pounding like a drum in his ears. The lights in the chamber dimmed. Darkness enfolded them, broken only by the soft glow of the embedded circuits in the walls and the luminescent lines along VYRN's skin. She turned to him, her gold eyes meeting his in the half-light. He could see the subtle parting of her lips, the rise and fall of her chest, the tension in her slender shoulders. He offered a tentative smile, trying to project reassurance. She pressed a hand to his chest, just over his heart, and the ridges on her forearm glowed softly. Close your eyes, she murmured, her voice gentle. Jonas obeyed, letting the darkness bloom behind his eyelids. Breathe with me, she said. He felt the warmth of her body as she scooted closer. Their legs brushed. A subtle electric thrill rippled up his spine. In the hush of the moment, he became aware of his own heartbeat, of how each breath drew in the faint scent of her hair, spicy, floral, and utterly alien. Then, faintly, he felt a push at the edges of his consciousness, like a gentle hand nudging a half-open door. He tried not to resist. He sank deeper into his breath, letting the wave of tingling energy wash over him. VYRN's presence seeped into his awareness, an outline of shape and color in his mind's eye. There was a swirl of deep indigo, a hint of starlight, a sense of longing. Memories flickered, images of a tall, regal female figure smiling gently at a younger VYRN. Her mother? Jonas sensed heartbreak, the grief that had never fully healed. It pressed on his chest like an echo of her sorrow. He inhaled sharply, tears burning behind his closed lids. He felt VYRN's gentle alarm. It's all right, she whispered. Stay with me. He forced himself to remain open. Another set of memories rippled through, fragments of the palace, of dancing in a sunlit courtyard, of whispered arguments with a stern-faced older Galar man, her father, the king. Jonas caught the edges of feelings, frustration, a sense of captivity, duty that chafed against her desire for freedom. Then came an image of a nighttime balcony, VYRN standing alone, tears in her golden eyes, longing for a connection she didn't have. A surge of empathy welled in Jonas, tears slipping down his cheeks. I'm sorry, he breathed, unsure if he was speaking out loud or in the telepathic current. She responded with a wave of warmth, acceptance. Then came the nudge in reverse. She was urging him to share in turn, to show his own memories, his own scars. He stiffened. Fear flared in his gut. But the sense of her presence was like a gentle embrace, coaxing him forward without force. Slowly, painfully, Jonas let the scenes unfold. The day he discovered his captain's smuggling, the day the authorities seized them. The betrayal by the woman he'd once believed he loved, her face twisted in an apologetic grimace as she pointed him out to the officers. The nights in a cramped cell, the humiliations, the forced confessions, the slow unraveling of trust he'd endured. He let Vyrn see how he'd grown bitter, how he'd lost faith in honest connection. Shame roiled within him, but he kept the channel open. He felt her emotional response like a cool, soothing salve. She offered compassion, sadness on his behalf, and a sense of fierce protectiveness that startled him. He never expected such a feeling from someone who, mere hours ago, was a stranger. Gently, she reached deeper, searching for the boy he once was before the cynicism took hold. Jonas nearly broke at that. He sensed her sorrow for the child inside him who once believed in loyalty and love, and for how life had hardened him. They lingered in that psychic dance for what felt like hours. Time lost its meaning in the swirl of shared memories and emotions. Physical reality receded. Sometimes Jonas surfaced enough to remember he was lying on a bed in a dark, humming room, with an alien princess pressed to his chest. Then another wave of memory or feeling would draw him under. They wove together in an intimacy that felt almost sacred. She saw him, truly saw him, and did not turn away. And he saw her, behind the regal mask, behind the luminous alien features, a soul hungry for understanding. At some point, exhaustion set in. Their breathing grew ragged. The mental connection lessened, receding like a tide. Jonas realized his face was wet with tears. He opened his eyes to find her looking at him, her cheeks also damp, the luminescent lines on her skin flickering like an unsteady heartbeat. They were so close their foreheads almost touched. Her breath was on his lips. He whispered her name, voice thick. She murmured his in response. For a long moment neither moved, eyes locked in the quiet hush. He felt his chest rising and falling against hers, felt the comforting pressure of her slender hands over his arms. In that moment, Jonas realized with awe that the fear had receded, replaced by a trembling gratitude. She exhaled, and with that breath, a subtle wave of warmth passed between them. He lifted a hand to brush away a lingering tear on her cheek. She leaned into his touch, eyes fluttering shut. Then, with gentle deliberation, she closed the distance and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, suffused with an electric tingle that Jonas suspected was more than simple biology. It was the echo of their shared connection. A slight gasp escaped him, and he deepened the kiss, letting his hands slide into the filaments of her hair. They felt cool and silky, alive with faint pulses of color. Their kiss tasted of vulnerability and promise, a cautious merging of two wounded souls. Every inch of Jonas's body ached with the need to comfort her, to protect her from the world's harshness, and to find in her arms a salve for his own wounds. She responded with equal fervor, her mouth parting to deepen the contact, her slender body pressing closer, tangling with his. But after a breathless minute, she pulled back, eyes heavy-lidded with emotion. "We must rest," she whispered, voice trembling. "The hour of flow takes a toll. We can explore more, in time." He nodded, heart pounding. They curled against each other, physically spent by the intense psychic exchange. Jonas didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how the final steps of the rite would test them. But for the first time in years, he drifted into sleep feeling less alone. Vyrn's steady breathing lulled him, her presence a balm that made the looming uncertainties almost bearable. Morning light spilled through the curved windows, painting the chamber's walls with muted hues. Jonas woke with a faint groan, blinking against the bright wash of color. For a moment, he panicked, forgetting where he was. Then the bed shifted beside him, and a graceful arm slid across his chest. He turned his head to see Vyrn, still half lost in slumber. Her eyelids fluttered, her ridges faintly shimmering as she inhaled. He realized he was staring, but he couldn't help it. She was, in a single word, exquisite. Memories of the night before rushed in. The telepathic immersion, the overwhelming closeness of it, the raw emotion. His heart swelled. He placed a gentle hand over hers, marveling at how natural it felt. She stirred fully then, golden eyes focusing on him. A soft smile curved her lips, echoing a warmth that Jonas recognized from the depths of the Arif flow. "Good morning," she said in her language, and the translator pinned to the bedside offered a soft echo in English. He returned the greeting. A wave of awkwardness threatened. He hardly knew the protocol for morning after conversations with an alien princess he was spiritually, or legally, or both, betrothed to. But the sense of closeness lingering from the telepathic exchange helped dispel any tension. They simply lay there, letting the hush envelop them. Before either could speak further, a chime sounded at the chamber door. Vyren slid from the bed, pulling a robe around her lithe body. Jonas followed, slipping his boots on. The door parted to reveal an attendant and Rena, the human diplomat who had introduced Jonas to the palace. She looked anxious, but her shoulders sagged in relief when she saw Jonas standing with the princess, apparently unharmed. "We have urgent news," Rena said. "It appears that not everyone in the royal court is supportive of this union, so to speak. There have been rumblings, talk of subterfuge. Some believe that if you two complete the next stage of this archaic ritual, it could shift certain power dynamics. There may be attempts to sabotage it." She grimaced. "We're still sorting the details." Jonas's pulse kicked up. He exchanged a look with Vyren, who grew visibly more guarded. "Are we in danger?" he asked. Rena exhaled. "Potentially. The Royal Guard is taking extra precautions. But there's also the matter of your final bonding rites. They're scheduled for tonight, correct?" She glanced at Vyren for confirmation. "We've been advised that once you complete them, the betrothal is nearly unbreakable under Gala law." Vyren gave a curt nod. "Yes. After tonight, the bond is recognized by the High Council. The only way to end it would be formal disavowal by the monarch himself. And that would shame the throne, causing ripples of conflict with your people as well. My father is not eager to be seen as weakening tradition. He likely wants us to succeed, for purely political reasons. But there are factions in the court who desire a different outcome. Perhaps they prefer alliance with other species, or they fear my partial enthrallment to a human." She let out a humorless laugh. "I am not certain. Yet sabotage is a real concern." Jonas felt a chill. "So the final rite, what exactly does it entail?" Vyren's features tightened, as if bracing herself. "It's the full Arif synthesis. A deeper merging that includes physical consummation and an exchange of essence." She paused, the color in her ridges flickering. "For Galar, physical intimacy is interwoven with empathic merging. The emotional resonance channels through our body's own secretions, especially when aroused. Some call it fluid-based empathy. If we successfully complete it, we seal the bond in a way that is irreversible." A swirl of heat and nervousness rolled in Jonas's stomach. His mouth went dry. The reality that he might be physically intimate with an alien princess tonight, in a deeply spiritual and telepathic sense, was almost too enormous to grasp. And yet part of him felt a pull, the memory of her mouth on his, the strange euphoria he'd felt in her presence. He also remembered the betrayals of the past. But as he looked at her determined expression, something in him decided that if he had to trust again, let it be now, with her. Rena cleared her throat, looking mildly uncomfortable. "Right. Well, I'll ensure no official from the human side interferes. But you should be careful. Watch yourselves. I've heard rumors that some Galar purists want to sabotage you before the final step so the bond fails." Vyren squared her shoulders. "I will alert the palace guards. We should remain together, Jonas. Safer that way." He nodded, ignoring the flutter in his chest. Rena gave them both a tight-lipped smile. "Right, then. I'll arrange additional security. Good luck to both of you." She left quickly, the door hissed shut, leaving Jonas and Vyren alone. She turned to him, her gaze laden with unspoken tension. "We do not have to do this if you do not wish to," she murmured. "Even if it prevents a war, forcing intimacy is not right." He shook his head vehemently. "No. If I learned anything last night, it's that I care about you. More than I ever thought I could. Whether we call it fate, or a bizarre tradition, I want to see this through. With your consent. He took a shaky breath, stepping closer to her. Do you consent? Her eyes shone with what Jonas recognized as relief, gratitude, and maybe longing. Yes, she whispered, voice trembling slightly. I do. A flicker of a smile ghosted his lips. Then we just have to survive until tonight. She gave a small laugh, though there was an undercurrent of worry in it. We shall. The day passed in a haze of heightened vigilance. Palace guards escorted them everywhere. Some of VYRN's servants scurried about with anxious expressions, whispering about conspiracies. Jonas noticed the occasional glare from passers-by, high-ranking court figures who looked at him with disdain. In the sprawling banquet hall, whispers followed them. He tried to ignore it, focusing on the unwavering presence of VYRN at his side. Several times, they exchanged glances that held a silent question, "Are you all right?" By late afternoon, the tension in the palace corridors had escalated. Jonas overheard frantic murmurs about an explosion in one of the lower levels. No injuries, but it was clearly sabotage. The culprit vanished. VYRN led Jonas to a safer wing, a set of private rooms locked by advanced biometrics. We'll wait here until the time for the final ritual, she said. She paced restlessly, her ridges flickering with anxiety. Jonas found himself crossing the room to place a gentle hand on her arm. You're worried about your father? He asked softly. She nodded. He is old, stubborn. I fear these tensions might push him to declare martial law on some rebellious nobles. My world is on a precipice, Jonas. He slid his hand down to grip hers. The gesture felt natural, as though they'd known each other far longer than 2 days. She squeezed his hand back, exhaling shakily. The final step, she murmured, is not just about us, but about uniting 2 cultures at a time when factions want to tear us apart. Jonas nodded, a knot in his throat. We'll make it, he said, mustering confidence he didn't fully feel. But the way she leaned into him for a moment, resting her cheek against his shoulder, made him all the more determined to see this through. They lingered that way, suspended in the hush of the private suite, until a summons eventually arrived that the ritual site was ready. They stepped into a chamber unlike any Jonas had seen. Located high in the palace spire, it was open to the evening sky on all sides, ringed by slender pillars that framed the twilight. Alien constellations glimmered overhead in swirling patterns of turquoise, pink, and silver. A circular dais occupied the center of the space, etched with lines of glowing script that branched out like arteries. A cluster of robed Galar officiants stood off to one side, chanting softly. The hum of hidden technology buzzed in Jonas's ears. Guards were stationed at every entry point, scanning the perimeter for threats. In the middle of the dais, a softly illuminated canopy of translucent material billowed in the night breeze. Jonas realized with a jolt that underneath that canopy was a raised platform lined with plush cushions. This was where the final step would occur, public, yet semi-private behind the veil of shimmering fabric. VYRN, at his side, trembled slightly. He felt her tension. They would be visible to the officiants, though presumably not fully exposed. One officiant, the same who had overseen their initial vow, stepped forward. Princess VYRN Saril, Jonas Teller of Earth, you stand on the threshold of the Araf synthesis, which merges body, mind, and spirit. If you choose to proceed, know that there is no turning back. The translator's monotone belied the gravity of the moment. VYRN spoke in a steady, regal tone. We choose to proceed. Jonas echoed her sentiment, though sweat slicked his palms. The officiant nodded, raising arms skyward. Enter the canopy. Drink of the Keshan elixir. Let your bodies open to each other, guided by the empathic resonance. If the bond is true, the lines of fate will converge, and you shall emerge bonded in the eyes of Galar law. The chanting resumed, a low, pulsing melody that seemed to vibrate through Jonas's chest. He followed VYRN onto the dais, stepping beneath the shimmering veil of the canopy. Immediately, the outside world faded, the chanting muffled, as though they had slipped into a bubble of half-light. The platform beneath their feet was soft, reverberating with the hum of hidden energies. A small table on one side held 2 cups of glowing liquid, the Keshan elixir. Viwairan looked at Jonas with wide, nervous eyes. He could see the faint quiver in her lips, the tension in her slender hands. Yet she also exuded determination. He brushed a thumb against her cheek, marveling at how quickly he'd come to crave her nearness. "We'll do this together," he whispered. She nodded and picked up one of the cups. He took the other. Together they sipped. The elixir was warm and tingling, sliding down his throat with a burst of floral and spicy notes. Almost immediately, Jonas felt a gentle euphoria expand in his chest, like a subtle loosening of tension. Viwairan inhaled sharply, ridges shimmering. Their eyes locked. The next moments happened in a series of dreamlike impressions. He found himself kneeling on the plush cushions, Viwairan across from him, their knees touching. The canopy glowed with swirling lights, reflecting the energies coursing through them. His breath quickened. He was aware that the officiants might be able to see silhouettes, but he no longer cared. His entire focus was on Viwairan and the bond about to be sealed. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a slow, tender kiss. Jonas returned the kiss, letting the taste of her fill him. The warmth of the elixir heightened every sensation. He felt as if their bodies were lightly electrified, each touch magnified. Her hands slid under his shirt, and her cool fingertips traced patterns across his skin. A low groan escaped him. He responded in kind, letting his palms roam the subtle curves of her waist, the gentle flare of her hips. They broke the kiss briefly, panting. Her golden eyes burned with intensity, pupils elongated to vertical slits in the half-light. The empathic link fluttered open at the edges of Jonas's awareness, beckoning him deeper. He surrendered to it, letting his guard down. Their minds brushed again, and he felt an upwelling of raw desire, tinged with anxious hope. She yearned to feel free, to forge a connection that transcended the prison of her station. He responded with his own yearning for belonging, for trust restored. Her mouth met his again, this time more insistent, devouring his breath. The rustle of fabric filled the small space as robes slid from her shoulders, revealing the luminous patterns along her collarbones and arms. Jonas's heart pounded at the sight of her, every alien contour a testament to her otherworldly beauty. She drew him close, guiding his hands across her skin. He discovered subtle, scale-like textures that made her shiver when stroked gently. Her ridges glowed brighter with each brush of his fingertips. In tandem, she pulled his shirt off, her slim hands exploring his chest, tracing the contours of muscle, the scars that told stories of his rough past. She saw them in glimpses through the telepathic bond, offering empathy instead of judgment. Their kisses grew urgent, a dance of tongues and parted lips, breath mingling in gasps. He could feel the slow burn of arousal building, a fire stoked by the closeness of her body and the thrumming connection of their minds. She whispered something in Galar that the translator did not catch, but he sensed her meaning in the swirl of mental images. "I accept you. I want you. Let us be together." His heart thundered in response. He gently guided her onto the cushions, his body covering hers. Their limbs tangled, the canopy swirling with flickers of prismatic light in time with the chanting. He felt dizzy, euphoric, and tender all at once. Then came the fluid exchange, a subtle, otherworldly nuance. Viwairan's body produced a faint, fragrant secretion at the height of her arousal, which Jonas could taste on his lips, his tongue, his skin. It sent a surge of empathic clarity through him, intensifying the bond until he felt her heartbeat as though it was his own. She, in turn, gasped as his sweat, his saliva, connected them. Their minds flared. Images, emotions, sensations all merged in a kaleidoscopic rush. No secrets remained. He felt her longing, her grief, her blossoming hope. She felt his shame, his fear, his fierce need to protect her now. Their bodies met in a fluid joining. She guided him inside, her legs wrapping around his waist. Jonas groaned, overwhelmed by the molten pleasure and the telepathic avalanche of sensation. Each thrust was an emotional wave crashing through them. She clung to him, nails, slightly sharper than a human's, digging into his back. He found himself murmuring her name, forgetting all else. Her eyes were half-lidded, shining with tears of ecstasy, her breath ragged in his ear. Moments stretched into a timeless crescendo. Jonas felt everything intensify, as if the entire cosmos funneled through their entwined bodies. Her mouth found his neck, pressing open-mouthed kisses that glowed faintly. He buried his face against her shoulder, inhaling her alien fragrance. Their hearts thundered in perfect unison. The empathic bond seared them together at a level deeper than Jonas had ever experienced. No corner of his heart could hide. No fear could stand. They were laid bare, two wounded souls forging a single, luminous tapestry of trust and desire. When the climax came, it was a shared wave of shuddering release that burst with light behind Jonas's closed eyes. He let out a choked cry, feeling Vyrn's body spasm around him, her ridges flaring in vibrant pulses of color. Their minds locked in that moment, hearts thrumming in absolute synchronicity. The canopy flared with rainbow luminescence, and Jonas swore he heard distant gasps from the officiants. But it mattered little. In the hush of that orgasmic union, it was just them, dissolving into each other. At last, they collapsed together, breathing in ragged sync. Jonas cradled Vyrn against him, her filaments of hair splayed across his chest. A sense of completion, of belonging, flooded him. He felt her mind nestled against his, the bond solid, though not oppressive. It was as if they'd become two branches joined at the roots, still distinct, yet inseparably linked. Somewhere outside, the chanting gradually faded. The shimmering canopy dimmed. Jonas pressed his lips to Vyrn's temple, tears slipping down his cheeks as he recognized the profound truth. He was no longer alone. She gazed up at him, tears shining in her own eyes. We did it," she whispered, voice trembling. The translator had shut off at some point, but he understood her. Their minds had found a common language. "Yes," he replied softly. "We did." When they finally emerged from under the canopy, the night sky felt sharper, more vivid. Jonas noticed every twinkling star with a newfound intensity, as if part of him had awakened to the cosmic wonder. Vyrn stood beside him, shoulders squared, luminous ridges still faintly aglow. A hush fell over the assembled officiants. One stepped forward, gazing reverently at them both. "It is done," the translator chimed. But before any further ceremony could proceed, the hush was broken by a clamoring from the stairwell. A cadre of armed figures rushed onto the spire, the flicker of energy weapons in their hands. Jonas's heart lurched. The guards around them moved to intercept. Vyrn's eyes narrowed. Jonas recognized the dangerous glint there, the protective, fierce side of the princess. She pulled Jonas back behind her, but he refused to cower. One of the intruders, a tall gaoler with a scowl etched across a face marked by harsh ridges, shouted something. The translator, reactivated, belatedly offered, "They cannot be allowed to complete this abomination. The purity of gaoler law must be preserved." He raised a weapon, aiming it at Jonas. Chaos erupted. Royal guards lunged, energy spears humming. A flash of light exploded as someone fired a disruptor shot. Jonas instinctively shielded Vyrn, adrenaline pumping. The officiants scattered, chanting turning into panicked cries. The intruders clearly meant to sabotage them after the fact, perhaps hoping to kill Jonas and nullify the bond. But to their surprise, the bond itself made Jonas hyper-aware of Vyrn's presence and emotions. He sensed her sudden surge of focus, the electric tension coiled in her muscles. She let out a sharp, alien cry that resonated with something in the environment. A wave of empathic force rippled out, disorienting the assailants momentarily. Jonas felt the echo in his own mind, an instinctive synergy that made him grit his teeth. He lunged forward, tackling the lead attacker just as they tried to shoot. The shot went wide, blowing a chunk out of a pillar. For a moment, it was bedlam. Guards and intruders wrestled. The thunder of energy discharges echoed off the open-air spire. Vyrn grabbed an unattended spear and spun it in a graceful arc, the tip crackling. Jonas, panting, pinned the attacker to the ground and wrenched the disruptor free. Another intruder came at him, but Jonas twisted, swinging the butt of the weapon. He caught them in the stomach, knocking them down. Fire roared in Jonas's veins, a fierce protectiveness. He wasn't a soldier, but his survival instincts kicked in, fueled by the knowledge that VYRN was at stake. After a frantic blur of movement, the last of the assailants were subdued or forced to retreat down the stairs. Royal guards flooded the spire, securing the perimeter. Jonas stood with chest heaving, scanning the area for VYRN. She was nearby, leaning on the spear, ridges pulsing with adrenaline. She was unhurt, thank the stars. Their gazes locked, relief flooding through the bond. He dropped the stolen disruptor and rushed to her side, heart pounding. She pressed her forehead to his, tears burning in her eyes. The officiant approached, face grim but resolute. "We must inform the king. He must address this treason." Then, with a softer tone, the officiant bowed. "Your bond is sealed beyond question. No force can break it now without dire consequences. You have proven your union's strength." Jonas swallowed hard, glancing at VYRN. She seemed shaken but resolute. "Let's see this through," he murmured, slipping an arm around her waist, ignoring the stares. They were bonded, and no conspiracy would tear them apart. Some time later, the king summoned them to the grand hall. This time, Jonas entered not as an awkward outsider, but as a recognized consort to the princess, albeit a consort who'd nearly been assassinated. VYRN held his arm, and the hush of the onlookers conveyed a mixture of awe and lingering hostility. It was not an easy triumph. But it was a triumph nonetheless. The king, a tall and imposing Gaeler with an ornate crest and stern face, surveyed them from his throne. His gaze lingered on Jonas with faint distrust, but also curiosity. The translator conveyed his deep voice. "You have bound yourselves under our ancient rights. By law, you stand as bonded mates. Many in this court question the union. But tonight's events reveal the lengths to which some will go to undermine peace. That cannot be tolerated." Jonas's spine stiffened. He sensed VYRN's tension. She stepped forward, ridges bristling. "Father, it is time we cast aside these archaic divides. The bond stands. Jonas Teller is my mate, and we shall not entertain any claim otherwise." A murmur rippled through the assembled nobles. The king's gaze bore down on them. Then, slowly, he gave a single, regal nod. "So be it." It was not a warm endorsement, but it was acceptance. A breath Jonas hadn't known he was holding escaped him. He felt VYRN's hand tighten around his. This was it, the new reality. They were one, a union that would shape the fate of their peoples. Peace negotiations would continue, trade routes would open, and the conspirators would face justice. Jonas and VYRN might not have the unbridled support of everyone, but they had each other. They had proven that trust and empathy could bridge even the strangest gulf. As they turned to exit the grand hall, VYRN whispered in Jonas's ear, "My mother would have been proud." Her voice trembled with emotion. He brushed a gentle kiss on her cheek, letting their bond radiate comfort. They walked hand in hand toward an uncertain future, but they walked it together. Night fell again, the second they'd shared as fully bonded lovers. In a private balcony chamber high above the city, Jonas and VYRN stood side by side, gazing out at the alien skyline. Below, lights flickered in swirling colors. Above, distant stars shimmered. A gentle breeze tugged at her filaments of hair, making them glisten softly. Jonas's heart felt impossibly full. The bond thrummed between them with a quiet, harmonious note, no longer as overwhelming as before. She turned, slipping her arms around his waist. He held her close, leaning his chin atop her head. They inhaled the night air, the hush of the city singing below. "Everything has changed so quickly," he said softly. "Part of me still feels like I'm dreaming." She peered up, gold eyes warm with affection. "If this is a dream, I choose not to wake." Her lips curved in a small, wry smile. "I never expected to find a partner like this. Our worlds are vastly different. And yet I sense you more deeply than I've sensed any Gaeler suitor. I do not regret it." Jonas brushed a strand of her luminescent hair aside. Neither do I, he whispered. My life has been a mess, a chain of disappointments. And now, it's as if I've stumbled into a destiny I never knew was waiting. You've healed a part of me I thought was broken forever. She leaned into him, pressing her cheek against his chest. For a time, they stood in a tender silence, letting the night enfold them. Jonas inhaled the scent of her hair, remembering how it felt to share mind and body so intimately. That memory would stay with him for the rest of his life. The closeness they'd achieved transcended simple lust or attraction. It was a genuine merging, a deep acceptance of each other's flaws and scars. Eventually, she spoke again. We have a long path ahead. There will be politics, obstacles, challenges. But as long as we remain together, bound by this trust we've forged, I believe we can overcome them. She pulled back slightly, meeting his gaze. Will you stay here, in the palace, or do you wish to return to your people? The alliance is still forming, but you are free to go if you desire. He cupped her cheek, feeling her ridges flutter under his palm. My place is with you. There's nothing for me back home. The only question is how we navigate living in your world. I'm willing to learn to adapt. A soft laugh escaped him. Never thought I'd be a consort to an alien princess, but here we are. She smiled, her eyes shining with genuine delight, and that sight flooded him with happiness. We shall figure it out together, she murmured. She tiptoed up, pressing a tender kiss to his lips, a promise that felt just as binding as any vow spoken before an entire court. Above them, a shooting star arced across the violet sky. Jonas closed his eyes, letting the calm night air carry him into the future, bonded with the remarkable woman who had once been a stranger. At that moment, he silently thanked the cosmic quirk that made him sneeze at exactly the wrong, and yet, perhaps perfectly right, time. And so, in the hush of that balcony, two souls from different worlds found a union that neither had expected but both had needed. Their bond, forged through ancient rites and tested by treachery, now stood as a testament to hope, a spark that could light the path forward for human and Galar alike. And though the night was still and the city quiet, Jonas swore he could feel the future beckoning with a soft, glowing pulse, inviting them to step into the unknown, together.